Recording.
All right. So, we'll start really basic. Could you just tell us, who you are, first name, last name, and, how you got involved at MPARC?
Okay. Should I look at you or?
No, look at Alec.
Okay. So my name is Betsy Kohut. I was a student at Millsaps College, which is where one of our project co-directors, George Bay, works. And I got started with the project as an undergraduate with him. And my first field season down here was 2004. And worked here for a while and went on to get my master's in archaeology, and then became the lab director here. So now I don't do excavations anymore, but handle things in the lab and the logging in, processing, washing, marking, and analysis of our artifacts here.
The trip that you took in 2004, was that an excavation?
Yes.
What were you researching?
At the time we were working at the pyramid at Puuc. That was my first field season.
Okay. So, from the beginning, were you interested in Mayan artifacts specifically, or was that just something that kind of came along?
I actually got started, I took an archaeology of Egypt class with Dr. Bay because I thought, who wouldn't want to take that class? And then he needed some help, was looking for a research assistant, that I started working as his research assistant at the college. And at the time we were just getting the biocultural reserve out at Puuc going. And so we were working on the website and different things for that. And so George said, well, you've been doing all this work with me about Mexico, you should take my Maya archaeology class. And then he said, well, since you're taking the Maya archaeology class, you should go ahead and come to Mexico with us for one of the excavations. And it was just kind of a gradual process of, I feel like, kind of reeling me in, and I've never left since then.
Just by happenstance?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, you got involved in Mayan, then how did the ceramic aspect kind of come together?
Well, like I said, my first few years down here, I was just excavating in the field. And we had a ceramicist at that point. I think he was working on his PhD. But George's area of focus is ceramics. And I remember one day I don't remember if I was sick or what, but I got to stay back in town and not go out to the field. And I helped him sort of what you see here, open a bag and pull everything out and decide what it is and write little notes and weigh it and count it and bag it all up. And I loved it. I'm a very organized person, and so it was totally right up my alley. And ever since then, I was always kind of bugging him, I would like to spend some time in the lab, but we always needed good field people. So he was like, no, I need you in the field. And when I was at grad school, I spent a season at Mayapan, which is a site between here and Merida, with my graduate advisor doing a lithic workshop. And when it came time for me to come back to Puuc, I said, okay, I want to come back, but I want to try the lab. And sort of same thing, I've never gone back. Once I got in the lab and George started training me on understanding and analyzing the ceramics primarily, and then I had lithics and biowork experience from grad school. So I focus, as you can see, the most of what we get is pottery, but I can do the lithics and other stuff too. So, and then we bring in osteologists and different people, when we have special burials or things like that.
So that work was outside of MPARC. How did you then, transition to working here?
was just a matter of I tried the other site and I did my master's degree there and I really enjoyed it, but this has always felt like home to me. So, so it was kind of like, oh, that was a nice visit to get out and see what else there is, but I want to go back and kind of, it's always felt like family here. And Telma and Rita, that you guys have met, have been working with us since a few years before I even got on the project. And so coming back down here really feels like a second home. So there's not really anywhere else that I would want to be.
So you touched on this place being, sort of a second home. Can you explore that a little bit and, why you get that sense?
I'm not really sure why. I guess there is sort of a core group of people who have always been here. The three co-directors, obviously George, Bill, and Tomas, have been around since before I was here. And then people have come and gone. We have undergraduates that come every field season, and most of them spend a year or two and then go on to do other things. But there is kind of a group of us that have stayed and done master's degrees and dissertations. And I think a big part of it is kind of that sense of family with those people of we've all decided to make this project part of our lives and a career in a sense, but more than a career, really, it feels more, it's work for sure, but it's more like a part of your life. And so I think that sense of family is a big part of it. The ceramics, obviously, I love, but the combination of doing something I'm really interested in and having that infrastructure of supportive people, people that we can go sit at lunch together and talk about our ideas and things that we found in the field, or, collaborative aspect of we are all constantly writing papers together and doing research together. I think collaborative probably is a good word to describe it, because it seems like anything that we do involves other people on the project. And it's like we're all working on it together. We all have this goal of better understanding this region of Mexico in the past. And we're all just kind of working together to that end. And along the way, have gotten to build this amazing facility. And the fact that we have wonderful staff here that makes amazing food and cleans for us and kind of handles the day-to-day things so that we can focus on the field work while we're here. Because it's usually for short periods of time, like during the summer when school's out. So it's very intensive when we are here, because it's like, okay, we've got 6 weeks. We have to do as much as we can in this 6 weeks, which is why it's helpful to have the staff here to kind of handle cooking and maintenance and things like that. So we can focus on the artifacts and the field work. But yeah, it does kind of, it feels like a work family.
So you talk a little about the roles of, the people that work here on the day-to-day. What would you say is, your daily involvement at the park?
So my usual day, depending on the time of year, because during the field season, I'm primarily handling the artifacts that as they're bringing them in, and supervising them getting washed. And then, as you can see, they get little numbers so that we know exactly where they came from. And then the boxing and putting everything in the computer now that we're trying to get everything digitized. So that's a big part of what I do. Times like right now, when the summer field season isn't going on, it's March now. So I came down for this trip to explore some ceramics we've excavated probably 10 years or so ago that I'm analyzing in more detail to give a paper on. So this time of year is a little different for me. It's more of an in-depth focused analysis on a certain subgroup of ceramics as opposed to just kind of processing, big loads of things that are coming in from the field.
So after that fun little tangent, let's come back and say, now that we've talked about it, what would you say some of the goals of MPARC are?
So when you say MPARC, do you mean like the archaeological project? So I guess I guess the big overarching goal is just kind of to better understand this region, the Puuc/Bolunchen region that we're in, and the sites in the area. And then you kind of get more specific goals based on the individuals of the project from there. Like, I think the co-directors each have different aspects, whether it's architecture or survey or the LiDAR project that Bill has the NSF on that we're working on right now, that they each kind of have their little niche that they're exploring. So I don't know that I could very adequately speak to what each of their individual goals are, but at least for me in the lab, it's really important to have these times that I come down right now that are off of the field season, like I mentioned, because during the field season it's a basic, everything gets analyzed and we know what we have and how much of it and how much it weighs, which is really kind of crazy when you add up like how many kilos of ceramics that we've got in our collections. But that's just kind of a basic surface level analysis, and it's these times that I come down, like right now, when I can go more in detail and pull what's laid out on the tables right now is one unit that goes down like 16 levels. And so I've got all of the ceramics from each level of that unit spread out all at one time, so you can do really a more intensive analysis of what was happening in that unit over time. And that gives us a different perspective than just kind of the basic surface level, what I do over the summer, because at that time there's so much material and you're looking at so many different contexts. People are excavating, sometimes as many as 3 sites at one time, because we've got different graduate students on the project. And so I'm looking at tons of stuff, and we've got all of those records, but it's when I can go back and pull specific contexts like this and really focus on, okay, what was going on at this site during this time period, or in this particular unit over a period of time, that I feel like we really make progress in terms of understanding, at least from the ceramics, the history of that particular place. So I feel like that, to me, is where I really feel the most reward of that we're making progress and really getting a better understanding of what was going on there at a given site at a certain period of time.
So would you say that, your goal through this is just for understanding or for something else?
That's an interesting question. I think definitely for me, understanding is a big part of it, but also in the bigger picture of us as, what even are we in? Like, we're not postmodern anymore. We're whatever phase it is that we're in. But as modern people living in 2018, and all of the different socio-political and economic things that are going on in the world right now, for me, I think it's important to have a good understanding of history, and as we know, history can be very biased, and I think archaeology is a great supplement to that, because it's hard to argue with the material evidence. And so to me, it seems like a very normal human kind of thing to want to understand human history and where we've come from, not only as Americans, but all over the whole world, where people have been, what they've done, the mistakes they've made, so that we can learn from that and hope to build a better future, or hope to, I guess, I don't know if that's a good word, but like progress in the sense of being better people and taking better care of the resources that we have, and paying, due respect to those that came before us, and kind of understanding the path that we as humans over time have walked and have led. And I think that's an important part for me, at least, of understanding who I am and who we are, and making sense of that, and then also sharing that knowledge with others through groups that we get that come through the site, or whether it's conference publications or journal articles, or we'd like to get some cases set up here so that we can display some of the nicer artifacts that we have, so that people can come through. And obviously material objects are always very interesting. That's why museums people want to see something. They want to be able to see it and touch it. And I think that a lot of times opens the door to having that conversation of, this is what that means, and this is where that came from, and this is why that's important. And so I think those are things that are really important to me to do for myself, but also things that I want to share with others, that I think it's important for all of us to learn about.
Excuse me, last question. Restrict.
So you mentioned two very interesting points about historical bias and, the ways through history that we got to this point. As, someone not from the Mayan community, how do you feel about researching and representing, this culture that isn't necessarily yours?
That's a good question too.
Hold on just 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Betsy, we need this.
Sorry. I was marking the angle with the pencil. It's okay.
Did you
Take a moment. Just take a moment.
Take a second.
Yeah, we're giving you it.
This is for me.
Okay, we need to. I'm sorry, Betsy.
That's okay.
You didn't get any of that, so we gotta start from the beginning. It's alright, because there was some ambient noise. Try to remember what you said, because this is our first interview, so it's a dry run.
Yeah.
That's okay. I mean,
That's,
and it's a learning experience for everybody, so don't.
is it recording now?
Yes.
Okay, just you.
Sorry about that.
Please start from the beginning of all that. At the
Okay.
beginning, you didn't. When you were younger, you didn't think much of it. Start from there.
Do you want to just repeat the question?
Yeah,
Okay.
that might help.
So, through the lens of historical bias and, the thought process of how we got here, as an outsider to this community and as a researcher, how do you feel about representing and researching a culture that is not inherently yours?
I think those are issues that I've focused a lot more on recently, and in different ways than I did initially. As an undergraduate, my first few years here, I saw it as a great experience to travel, and I hadn't been out of the United States at that point. Well, I guess I had been to Europe for a few weeks, but had never been to Mexico, hadn't traveled much outside of the U.S., didn't speak any Spanish aside from like a basic, 101 sort of colors and numbers and things like that. So it was scary, but it also felt exciting. Like this is, something good to do, an adventure. And I really enjoyed meeting the people. I mean, I love the scenery. I haven't been able to leave Mexico since then. But the questions, like you mentioned, of, the implications of being an American here and doing, having this sort of responsibility in a sense of cultural heritage that's not necessarily my own, a part of my own direct history, are things that I've thought more about more recently since I've done graduate school and become a more mature human being. I was trained as an archaeologist. Our program at Millsaps, archaeology falls under sociology, anthropology, but I still focus more heavily on archaeology, obviously. So as I've branched out a little more into sociology and cultural anthropology, questions like that have come up, and it's really kind of like at one point I was thinking, should I even be here? There are Mexican archaeologists perfectly capable of doing this. What right do I have to, come in and say, oh, well, here, let me do this and let me have a say into your past. And I think where I've landed on my thoughts about that have been, as long as you're doing it, as long as you've got good intentions, which don't always make the difference, but I think if your intentions are good and you're working responsibly and our project's, like I mentioned, very collaborative. We work closely with one of our co-directors works with Ina, and so I feel like we really make it a point to integrate into the local communities and be aware of what other Mexican archaeologists are doing and be involved in conversations with people that live here and have more at stake in a sense than we do. We're just, coming from America and doing our summer field season and then we leave. But at least we on this project don't take that lightly. It's not something that we take flippantly of, we come and do our fun thing and then, we go back home. But I do think I feel fortunate that especially some of the grants and different things people on the project have been able to get, is money that we've been able to bring in and spend on doing the things that we're interested in and furthering a lot of the research goals that the Mexican archaeologists in the area have as well. And so I feel like in that sense we can contribute, both financially and educationally and all of these things and help make progress. Because I feel like the financial aspects of it are like a serious consideration. Even on our project, we've been fairly fortunate to get some NSF grants and some Nat Geo grants and things that have been really helpful. But the costs of, excavating and hiring are one thing, but something that we're dealing with even now is the long-term costs of, for example, storing our collections and building the warehouse. We just built an addition on. We got some of the money from one of the grants we used to add on to our warehouse where we store things. But we're getting to the point now where we're having to replace boxes from the early years that were cardboard and just falling apart, and bags and tags from 2000 and actually the 80s and 90s we've got artifacts from that are falling apart. And it's a significant amount of money and energy that's going to need to go into properly taking care of those artifacts. And so I feel like having people who care about the culture history and who have spent our lives educating ourselves and learning about it in order to help learn about it and work with the other archaeologists here and people in the area to make progress. And then if we can get grants and things like we have and be able to help out financially in a lot of the costs of not only doing the archaeology, but then making sure that for the future these things are preserved and taken care of and documented, so that all of the work that we've done in 20 years isn't just useless. So I guess for me, I have come to realize my own sort of role that I play more recently as an American archaeologist coming in from a first world country. And that's something that I think it's important to be aware of, and definitely realize, that we're outsiders and that we should take a back seat in a sense and follow the lead of the Mexicans who live here and who have been here before us and have been doing this. And especially, kind of the sort of not so nice past that we have of Americans and Europeans coming in and scooping up things, beautiful things that they like, and taking them back to where they came from. And it's like we need to recognize that and be aware of it and make a conscious effort to make things different, to do, like I said, to learn from the past and be better humans now and be better researchers now, and be more collaborative and work together with the people that are already here who are doing wonderful work. And I would like to continue to be a part of that. So.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
I just have one quick question, and this is the last question, I promise.
Mm-hmm.
How is that awareness, you've alluded to it already, but your awareness of your own positionality, how is that manifested specifically in your work here, whether it's specific actions, modes of conduct for you, for MPARC, but we're thinking of like future directions. How has that informed the way that you see your work and you perform your work?
Let me think.
Save the toughest questions for the end.
Could you say that one more time?
Yeah.
Or sort of. I feel like that's a lot to think about.
So
Yeah.
putting, these broad strokes.
I guess the biggest thing that pops out to me when you say that would be making more efforts to, for example, I've visited some of the museums and the Ceramateca in Merida. And those have been great opportunities to sort of see the artifacts and talk to the Ina ceramicist there about a lot of the work that's been done by Mexicans and artifacts that have been brought in, and projects that have been going on here led by Mexican archaeologists for a long time. And I'm planning another trip to the Ceramateca here soon to research more some of the early ceramics that we're finding. So I think it's building relationships like that, not only with our Mexican co-workers, I guess, that are on the project, the directors and different PhD and master's students that we have that are working here, but also building relationships with other Mexican scholars at Wadi or universities or the Ceramateca, building those relationships with them and having conversations with them and making sure that we're not functioning as an island on our own and we're just doing our own thing, but that we're connected with what else is going on and aware of research other people are doing, and sort of I'm trying to think of a good way to explain that, just kind of plugged in, and that gives you the opportunity to have criticism, I think, especially by presenting and having these conversations, which is never fun. But it's really important to have that opportunity, to give others that opportunity. And of course, there are always people who are just going to be jerks and, whatever. But to honestly listen to the perspectives of others, and sometimes they can see things that you can't see, and be willing to maybe do things a little differently, or just have a greater awareness moving forward with the research projects that you're working on. I know the woman who is in charge of the Ceramateca in Merida, I believe she's French, but when we visited her, she went on a little bit of a rant about how none of the American archaeologists, or many of the American archaeologists and ceramicists, don't want to read articles that have been published by Mexicans because they're in Spanish. They're harder to access, but they're also in Spanish. And that was something that was hard to hear, but it was also true. And I know I've made more of an effort since then to go out of my way to make sure and find those articles and find those master's thesis or dissertations, because those are really important documents to have and important things to read. And reading things for work in English isn't always a lot of fun, much less in a second language, that adds to the level of difficulty. But what she said really struck me at the time, and it was not a comfortable feeling, but I feel like listening, being able to be open and listen and say, hey, you know what? She's right. I need to do things differently, even if that's outside my comfort zone. That's what's best for me. That's what's best for archaeology. That's what's best for that larger goal that we have. And so that I know is something that for me personally has been one of the biggest things of, you can't always, accessing the literature that's easiest for you isn't a good way to go about doing good research. So that's probably the biggest thing that I can think of.
That's great. Thank you, Betsy.
You're welcome.